I am your host, Janet Sandberg. I am a transformational life coach, energy healer, and divine channel, among other things. And today I am joined by Slider Henriksen. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. I'm excited to hear your story and learn a little bit more about you. So, why don't we start with that? Tell us about yourself.
Okay. Just kind of like a little background you'd like to hear, and kind of like what I'm doing now type thing.
Yeah, just, who you are, what you do, what you like to do in your spare time, whatever you want to share.
Okay. So yeah, hi. I am Marie Slider Henriksen. That's kind of my pen name. Slider is my maiden name. Henriksen is my married name. I just got married last year, so I'm kind of a newlywed. We went on our honeymoon just a couple months ago. So
Congratulations.
thank you. So everything's still kind of fresh. I have had a lot of experiences in my life between, childhood trauma. I was in foster care, dealt with different types of abuse. In junior high, I dealt with rape and drugs and alcohol. I was in the military, deployed to Iraq, dealt with stuff like that.
Wow.
Got real lost in alcoholism for a long time and got sober about 8 years ago. In those 8 years, I have been divinely given a gift of writing. I write
Mhm.
poetry about healing from trauma and addictions and finding peace, hope, and faith and love. And I also and overcoming like fear, anger, and resentment. I've been in the psych unit a couple times. I've done lots of different types of therapy in support groups. I'm connected with the local recovery community. I also help other veterans in finding recovery from their PTSD and recovery from addictions. And I have a book coming out with my poetry and my photography. It is finished.
Amazing.
I am just waiting for the printed copies and to finish up some online stuff to start selling online.
All
So,
right.
yeah.
Super exciting. What's the book
So,
called?
yeah. So it's called More Me Than I Used to Be, A Journey to Freedom.
Love it.
So it will have my poetry in it as well as the images are all my own photography that I've done over the years as well.
Beautiful.
Yeah. And so I do that writing. I work in the recovery community, and I kind of have become an unofficial peer support person. I talk to a lot of different people about a lot of different things because I have a lot of different experiences and I love
Yes.
to talk. So, and I love to just share my hope and my faith with other people and guide them in their own journey and help be a facilitator of healing for them. So
Amazing.
that's a short and skinny of me.
All right. Well, let's do a little bit of a deeper dive into some of those things. And obviously the reason you're here today is because you weren't always so together and focused and doing the things that you're doing now. So
Yes.
what was going on back then when you were feeling like maybe you didn't want to be here anymore?
So I've had a couple different instances of that. You know, as I said, I come from a very colorful background, being in
Mhm.
foster care. And kind of growing up, I didn't really know how to handle a lot of things. There was a lot of stuff that wasn't talked about. There's a lot of stuff that I wasn't asked about, and a lot of stuff I didn't feel like I could talk about.
Right.
And there was moments where I didn't want to exist, but I wasn't quite at that suicidal level. But I knew
Mhm.
that I wasn't comfortable in my own skin. And I don't know how much details you would like, but there was a point where I was self harming
Mhm.
without being suicidal when I was a teenager.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the beginning of my addictions. I started with the food addiction with bulimia, and then I was introduced to drugs and alcohol. And so once I had that solution to my problem, the drugs and alcohol became my life.
Right.
And I was really lost in a lot of addictions for many years, between codependency, sex, alcohol, drugs, food addiction, whatever it was, anything that could make me feel better, because I didn't feel comfortable in my skin and I didn't know
Mhm.
why. I
Yeah.
never really addressed anything. And so that the addictions were the thing that kept me going for many years, even throughout my military time. I was getting drunk, it was people, it was whatever I could pursue. There was many layers to it, and I put myself in different situations that throughout the years, where I had at one point, I was 17 and ended up getting raped and had
Mm.
my virginity taken by three men.
Oh my God.
And that was right before I went into the military.
Hmm.
And so some of my actions led to other things, not as a victim shaming, but taking responsibility for my addictions that put me in places that I shouldn't have been, and then people
Mm.
took advantage of that.
Right.
And then I was in the military, and then the drugs and the alcohol was still involved. I hadn't dealt with any of my stuff, and I got married and divorced, and then military deployment, and so dealt with a whole lot of stuff. And so when I got out of the military, I ended up getting medically discharged and went through another time where I was not wanting to be here, because I hadn't faced any of my childhood stuff.
Hmm.
And then you added on all of the military stuff that happened. And then I got medically discharged. And so I couldn't be the person that I had trained to be, or
Right.
continue doing the job that I wanted to. So I went through
Yeah.
another layer of not wanting to be here anymore. And in that moment, I chose to get some help. And I had been seeing therapists for years, right?
Hmm.
But even in this point, I reached out and asked for help, but I had not processed through a lot of things. So it was kind of, I was talking about this, so they didn't ask me about this. Like I
Right.
said, hey, I'm not okay, I need help, but I wasn't telling them about the drugs and the alcohol and the promiscuity. And so I still never really confronted things, right?
Hmm.
So then that leads me up to, there was years after I got out of the military where it was again just lost in the addictions, and I didn't realize it, but there was a lot of passive suicidal ideations. I would
Mm-hmm.
picture accidents happening while I was driving. I would
Right.
I would imagine these accidents and be like, I'd be okay if I went this way. I'd be
Hmm.
okay if I went that way. There was also episodes where I drove drunk multiple times. And so I was putting myself in dangerous
Yeah.
situations. Now, thank God, nothing happened, but it
Yeah.
was still, there were so many layers of this passive suicidal ideation, because I didn't know what was going on inside of me. And I was just covering it with all of my addictions for years and years and years. So then we fast forward, and I know I'm skipping through a lot of layers, but
That's
the
okay.
the the big thing that happened about 2017, January of 2017, I had my last drunk. Okay. And in my last drunk, I almost killed a friend and me. In I was driving drunk, and I had swerved so hard. I was driving in the fast lane, and it was the middle of the night, and going 70 and a 70 in the fast lane. So people are going 80, 90, 100 past me.
Right.
I was so drunk, I was swerving, and I swerved so hard I almost hit the guardrail.
Oh.
And right before I did that, I, overcorrected.
Hmm.
And as I overcorrected, literally God grabbed the wheel out of my hand and straightened my car as somebody went zooming past us. If
Wow.
we would have been hit in that moment, because that person was going about 100 miles an hour, my friend would have been dead and I would have been dead. Okay. So that was kind of a wake up call for me. So
Yeah.
I got us home safely. Well, I didn't get us home. God got us home safely, and I started realizing how much I hadn't cared about my life, right? I've had these
Mhm.
passive suicidal ideations. I didn't really care about my life. I didn't really care so much about strangers. I was definitely a people pleaser, but it was more to manipulate them to like
Mhm.
me because I didn't like me. And
Right.
so I was no longer risking strangers. I was no longer just risking myself who I didn't care about, but I almost killed a friend of mine. And
Yeah.
that was when I was like, okay, some things need to change. So that is when I started my recovery journey, my sobriety journey.
Okay.
So the first year and a half of my recovery journey, when I got sober, I was in such a deep depression. Like the alcohol and the drugs that I had done had dropped me into this depression because I had all of this stuff that I never faced. And then I was
Sure.
just depressing it, pushing it down and down. So I
Mhm.
started taking an antidepressant. After about a year and a half, that first year and a half was really rough. It was like I would curl up in a I would go to work, I would go to a meeting, I would go home and curl up in a ball and cry. I had to push
Oh.
away friends, I had to push away family, I had to
Mhm.
like literally change everything in my life. And then at that point I also had to quit my job. And that was
Oh,
when I became
wow.
unemployable. I haven't been able to work since I got sober because
Hmm.
a lot of physical stuff started manifesting
Right.
and a lot of emotional stuff. And now I
Mhm.
have recently, just in the last year or two, been diagnosed with something called hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome.
Yeah.
It's a genetic condition where my body makes the wrong kind of collagen, and it's kind of
Mhm.
what led me to getting kicked out of the military, but I didn't know it. The military made
Sure.
this genetic condition worse, and then the
Yeah.
drugs, the alcohol, the food addiction, everything added on to making things worse.
Yeah.
So when I got sober and I was no longer self-medicating, the physical stuff started getting worse, the pain started getting worse, and the emotional stuff started getting worse. And I got to a point, I was about, like I said, a year and a half sober. I had started doing a little bit of therapy. I did dialectic behavioral therapy, and I started kind of confronting some of the stuff that was going on with me. And I started having seizure like episodes that my body couldn't handle.
Wow.
Come to find out, so I have something else that's called POTS, and I think that that
Mhm.
was involved, but there was also manic episodes that I was having as well.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. So there were so many different layers to happen. And so then at one point, I had gone to an art show where I was selling some of my art because I've worked with oil pastels and I've done photography and stuff like that. So I had gone to an art show, and there was an incident that happened, and I got triggered into some childhood trauma of
Oh
mine,
no.
and I didn't know how to handle it. I
Mm.
was no longer self medicating. I didn't know how to handle it. And I had gone to see my now husband. I'd gone to visit him. And on my way home from seeing him, there was a split second that I almost stopped my car in front of a train.
Oh.
And as I was driving and I was picturing this in my mind, I was like, this will just make everything go away.
Mhm.
And I didn't even know at that moment that I had been triggered to my childhood trauma. I just knew that I was feeling
Mm.
heavy. I didn't know what was wrong. I was like, I'm just ready to be out of here. Like it was just that
Mhm.
that that thought process. I'm like, I'm ready to be done. And so I'm getting ready to go to this train, and I'm looking like getting ready to go onto these tracks, and I'm looking for a train because I'm like, all right, I'm ready. And so like I actually like started driving slower, hoping that a train would come so I could just stop and
Wow.
just be done, because that just would have been quick, fast, and in a hurry.
Mhm.
Thankfully, I was able to walk through those urges. And I went and I drove over, and instead I went to a meeting. And
Mhm.
in the meeting, in the middle of the meeting, I was like, yeah, I realized that, I wanted to put my car in front of a train. I didn't know what was going on. And I was like, so matter of fact, like I was like numb at this point because I still don't
Mhm.
realize or recognize what's going on. So then I go outside and I'm talking to somebody, and they make a comment, and then it hits me. I am triggered into my childhood trauma, and I drop to my
Mm.
knees and just start crying. And I was like, I am not okay. And then I had an old veteran dude come up to me, and he told me, I don't want to bury you next week, so get your butt to the VA hospital.
Mm.
And so in that moment, I was like, I'm not okay. So I called a friend of mine, and I had her drive me. And I knew that I was not going to go willingly, basically.
Mhm.
I was like,
Mhm.
oh, let's just go home so I can get my clothes. And she knew. And she's like, nope,
Yeah.
we're going. And so
Yeah.
she drove me, and I get into the ER, and they evaluate me. And within half an hour, I have convinced the doctors that I'm totally fine and that I can leave.
Oh my gosh.
So I go out, and well, at first, at like when I first went in there, they said you could either have an ambulance drive you to the psych unit, which is an hour away, or your friend can take you. But then within
Mhm.
that half an hour, I convinced them, no, I'm fine. Like there's really nothing wrong with me. And so I
Mm.
walked out of the hospital. Luckily, my friend stuck around. And I told her, yeah, I'm
Mhm.
good to go home. She's like, no, you're not.
No, you're
And so
not.
she put me in the car, and she drove me that hour or two, whatever it was. And so that was my first time in the psych unit, you know. So I went into the psych unit, and that in the psych unit, I was at the VA. And for the first time since I had got out of the military, I finally was able to allow myself to be triggered into the military, or to really understand my
Mm.
military trauma as well.
Right.
Because earlier that year in January was my first time in fireworks, without
Okay.
without drugs or alcohol. Because anytime
Mhm.
there's fireworks, it was always drugs or alcohol.
Yep.
For years and years. But
Yeah.
that January, those fireworks actually affected me that year, and I was like, man, what the heck is wrong with me? I'm like beating myself up, and I'm just like, this is so stupid. I thought it was so stupid that people would get triggered by fireworks, right? And then it
Until it
happened to
happened to
me.
you.
Yes. And then like I said, I just pushed it down, pushed it down, pushed it down. But then I'm in the psych unit, and I'm hearing other veterans talk about their PTSD. And that was when I was finally able to open up and realize that I have PTSD from my
Mhm.
childhood all the way to my military trauma.
Mhm.
I have PTSD. And that was my first time saying, oh my gosh, like there is a name for this.
Mhm.
And while I was in the psych unit, I actually wrote a poem that's called "Hope in the Fight." And that poem was so meaningful for me because that was the first time that I genuinely was like, hey, I'm really not okay. And there is so much hope in this. And,
Mhm.
and like I had already kind of developed a relationship with my higher power. I had started going back to my childhood church. I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Okay.
I had gone through this spiritual awakening when I first got sober. And I started out with, my higher power's love and connection, because it's something that I've never really felt. And then I learned how to connect with nature and and everything from Native Americans. I learned how to do like meditations with Buddhists. I learned some interesting lessons from a Mexican shaman, and I learned how to praise with non-denominational, and I wound up back into my childhood religion. And
Mhm.
with that, I developed this opening of who my higher power was, and that God is everything. And in that psych unit is when I really felt the most like loved and secured and held. and understood. So that was kind of like the beginning of this huge transformation that happened with me. Like it had already started when I got sober, but in this moment, it was like, hey, I genuinely want to be here. I don't
Mhm.
want to run. I don't want to hide. I don't want to kill myself. I need some help. And so that was kind of like the beginning of their so over the next 5 years, there was a very interesting journey where they originally diagnosed me bipolar borderline with PTSD.
Oh,
And
wow.
my yeah, and so then my disability was taken care of. They started me on a whole bunch of different medications. You know, I started like moving forward in my church, in recovery. Things were kind of doing good, but there was still something that wasn't right. And
Mhm.
I couldn't figure it out. I now had a desire to live, but I started realizing that my desire to live was based on my worth of other people still.
Mm.
I started realizing that my desire to live was because I felt like I had to take care of other people. I had to do service work. These are the things that I have to do. And I was really stuck in this, like even with my church. I went to the temple when I wasn't ready to go because it was well, I'm in church. This is what I'm supposed to do. And there
Right.
was there was there was a lot of stuff that I still hadn't processed. I did the dialectic behavioral therapy again, but still something just was not right still. And I couldn't put my finger on it, and I did not realize how much. I am so sorry, I've got to wipe my nose for a second. um so I didn't realize how much that things were still going on until 2020, until everything got shut down in 2020,
Mhm.
when I no longer could be around the people that I am trying to please, when I no longer was
Mm.
able to put up a show for other people, when I
Yep.
no longer could do all the service work that I was defining myself by, in that time frame, I started losing my mind again. I started turning to food a lot more. I just wasn't okay. And I got into this deep depression again. And over the next year, I just wasn't okay. And then I got a call from my brother who asked me to move to Utah. So at this point, I'm living in North Carolina.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, and I got a call that said, hey, can you move to Utah to kind of help out with our parents? And I was like, okay, I can do that. And I had this feeling inside that it was where I needed to be.
Mhm.
So 20 end of 2021, I move out to Utah. By the beginning of 2022, I'm at the biggest that I have ever been. I had gotten up to 250 pounds. My food addiction had just gone way haywire. I wasn't drinking or drugging anymore. I had dropped caffeine, but I was still, eating, and that
Yeah.
was my big thing. So finally, here in Utah, I was able to get into cognitive processing therapy. Now, cognitive processing therapy saved my life, and it was so phenomenal. So I started doing cognitive processing therapy where you identify the lies and the programming that you have inside of your head and in your heart. You
Mm.
identify those lies and you challenge them and you find new truths. And there were
Right.
so many lies that I had no value of my own. I was basing my value on what other people think, or my body, or my mind, or all of
Yeah.
this stuff. I wasn't able to find that value within myself. So I did this trauma therapy. And during this trauma therapy, all of a sudden I started having cognitive processing issues and memory issues that were worse. I was having issues with
Mm.
dissociation. There was a lot of stuff going on. They finally realized that I am not bipolar. I am borderline, only
Oh,
borderline. So bipolar is a chemical imbalance.
yeah.
Borderline is an emotional, problem.
Mhm.
And so what had happened was those meds that I'd been taking for 5 years were helping while my body found some balance. But when I started actually processing through my trauma, they started having adverse reactions.
Right.
Yes. So I was struggling with, I was having cognitive processing issues. I was having, emotional issues. I was having a lot of stuff. And at that time, again, I had gotten to this point of more active suicidal thoughts. And I'm like, I'm not okay. I am not okay. I don't want to be here. I processed through all this trauma, and I'm still feeling so heavy and so bad. I'm not allowed to drink. And I was like in this like anger. I'm not allowed to drink. I'm not allowed to drug. At this point, I'm also working on actively losing the weight. And so I was just not in a good place.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got to a point again where I was like, if I stay where I'm at, I am going to kill myself.
Mm-hmm.
I am not okay. So I was open to my therapist. I was open to my friends, my sponsor, a couple other people. And I was like, I am not okay. These meds are having issues. And my therapist was like, we need to get you into the psych unit like immediately to get you off of these meds as quickly as we can and to make sure that you don't hurt yourself.
Right.
So that is when I ended up in the psych unit the second time. So this was the end of 2022.
Okay.
So in 22, the December of 22, they detoxed me off of 5 different medications in 2 weeks.
Oh my God.
Yes.
Wow.
And it was the best choice that could have happened, So I get off of that. I also started establishing boundaries with some family members and some friends, and I've processed through all of this stuff. Around this time, so there's multiple layers that I have going on here, right? So I am off of the medications. I'm being taken care of. I'm feeling less suicidal. My emotions are kind of calming down a little bit, but then my physical stuff started getting way super worse. So with this Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, when I was in the military, the muscles kept my body stable.
Okay.
When I got sober, I had gained a bunch of weight, which the fat kept me sober. And then I started losing weight, but I was working out. Now, then I gained all that weight, got back up to 250, and I started losing weight just by changing my food habits. So I didn't gain any muscle. Because I didn't gain the muscle and I was losing the weight, everything started moving more because I've got a defective collagen. And it tore my hips up completely. I mean, like I had labral tears. I already had arthritis and bursitis and tendonitis. I had bone spurs. Like everything was tearing up in my hips. And I ended up, I was also having back problems. So psych unit in December. January, I get a breast reduction to try to help my back a little bit. But that also messed up how my body is moving. Okay. So losing weight, off the meds, trying to heal from this surgery, find out my hips are just losing it. So I'm not on any of my mental health medications. And so I am doing all of this by the grace of God, white knuckling it, doing as much therapy as I can and recovery and just trying to hold on. And I was miserable, but I was for the first time in my life off of every single stimulant, and I was feeling the emotions, and it was so super heavy, but it was so worth it. But then they figured out, okay, well, you need hip replacements.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. Yeah. So as I went to this doctor to say, now before this, I didn't know about the genetic condition. All I know is I've got multiple functions in my body that are having issues. I've got arthritis in multiple joints. I've got internal problems. There's a lot of things. And I'm trying to tell the doctors, hey, I think everything's connected. I think it's connected. Something's not right. I think it's connected. And so I feel like I'm going crazy because they're like, no, it's not connected. Everything's separate. So I'm going through this mental stuff of I am going crazy, and I'm just being a wuss. And this is just a figment of my imagination, or it's a punishment from me getting sober, so I'm like going through all of these emotions with all of this stuff. And I go in to see this doctor. And if there's any veterans out there in Utah, Dr. Swayze at the VA hospital is phenomenal. So I go in, yes. So I go in to see him, and he comes in with a shit eating grin. And he's like, "You're more flexible than you should be needing hip replacements." And I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "I think you have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome." And he had this giant smile on his face. And I'm like, "What is that?" So I finally got a name to the monster, you
Right.
know? So I have a name to the emotional monster, which is borderline personality with dissociation and PTSD. I have a name to the physical monster, which is the
Mm-hmm.
Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. I've processed through a lot of my trauma, and I am finally, feeling a little bit better. So moving forward to, we'll say, September of 2023. Okay. That was when my husband and I started officially dating. We had been best friends for years and years and years. So we started dating in September. October of 23, I end up in the care facility for getting my hips replaced. And it's a
Okay.
veteran care facility. Okay. So I get my first hip done in October. December, I get COVID.
Ugh, of course.
January, I get married. Yeah. Beginning of February, we have to put my cat down, who was my emotional support animal.
Mm-hmm.
And then February, we get my left hip done.
Oh my
Okay.
gosh.
So everything is happening just really quick. Okay.
Yeah.
So I've dealt with a lot of things, but being in this care facility, I'm also being faced with a lot of death, because it's a veterans home. It's mostly for old folks, but there's a lot of people that are coming and a lot of people that are going, a lot of people who are dying. I'm being faced with that. They had this um, police training that they did there, and there was there was unwanted, you know, an unwanted sexual advance by somebody, and there's a couple other things that are happening in there. And I again am at this, just point that I'm just not okay, and just feeling really rough. And I started getting into binging and purging really bad, and my bulimia, so I was
Mm-hmm.
focused on that for a long time. So we get my left hip done in February. In April, my husband starts dealing with his own PTSD symptoms, and he ends up in the psych unit for himself.
Oh my
Okay.
gosh.
So then when I finally move in, so we got married in January, I moved in with him in May. So I'm healing from my hip replacements, and I end up moving in with him. So I'm dealing with my stuff. He's processing through his. We're giving each other that space to do that. But around this time, now that I am living with my husband, this is the first time I'm actually dating someone in my sobriety. And I get
Mm.
triggered into all of my past relational trauma. And so then again, I am feeling super, super suicidal again. Like, I am not okay. This is too much for me to handle. I can't handle it. It was mostly passive, but at this point, my husband and I had both given our weapons away to somebody else.
Good.
And he's in an intensive outpatient program dealing with his own. I went with him to go be supportive as a family member, and between all of us, the two therapists that were there, they're like, "You should be here too." So I was able to go into this intensive outpatient program to process through and start learning more, because I had never actually talked to anybody specifically about my PTSD and my suicidal ideations. And
Mm-hmm.
this was the first time that I felt safe enough to finally open up. I don't want to be
Right.
here.
Yeah.
I had dealt with, I got the names of all of these issues, but I hadn't actually like realized just how suicidal I really was,
Mm-hmm.
you know? until I was able to start learning more about it and be around people who were so open about it, you know?
Yeah.
And then I was in this safe relationship where my husband accepted me for me. I accepted him for him. We allowed each other that space to heal. And we were both able to face our demons separately and together, and
Yeah.
to build and learn and grow in this relationship, you know? And so I finally was able to get to this place where I'm like, I am okay. I want to be here. There is hope. I was able to go through, and that IOP was just phenomenal because we went through and we looked at, okay, here's the different areas of values in your life. Okay, what are your values that you want to work on? What are your priorities that you want to work on? What are your goals? And now let's find a purpose for you. And
Hmm.
I was finally able to kind of see, you know, where my worth really, really lied. And that is with my higher power. And that it's not based on what I could do for other people. It's not based on my body. You know, my body started falling apart. You know, I yes, I got my hips replaced, but there's also all sort I've you know, when I've got this wrist brace on, when I'm out, I have to wear knee braces and a brace around my waist and custom orthotic shoes. And I have canes that I use, and you know, there's all sorts of stuff. And like I've had to come to this realization that my body is not my worth,
Yeah.
you know, with that. And then also, you know, my past of hypersexualization, you know, my body is not my worth in that aspect. I
Hmm.
started dissociating, having memory problems and cognitive processing problems, and because I thought my brain was my worth. I'm intelligent. I was an applied mathematics major once. You know, I thought
Yeah.
that my brain was my worth, and God's like, nope, that's not your worth. I'm going to take that away too. I thought that my family was my worth for so long, right? And I had to put up boundaries against some of them while I did my own processing, because I was just people pleasing and I wasn't taking care of myself. You know, I thought that what I could do for other people was my worth, but I had to take 8 months back where I couldn't do service work, and other people had to help me, and I had to humble myself to be like, I'm not okay. I need help. I need
Hmm.
service work. And so I really had to confront all of this stuff that I thought was my worth in order for God to strip everything away and say, no, your worth is with me. Let's find your value. Let's find your goals. Let's find your purpose. And that was when I really, truly, over this last year and a half, has been me really finding where my worth is and being able to be there for other people, to show them that healing is possible because I want to, not because I'm expected to, you
Hmm.
know, to show them this is my journey that I have found that works for me. I was able to find that love and that compassion. I was able to do some step work to let go of resentments and angers and frustrations. And I was able to find this peace within my higher power and within myself that had nothing to do with anybody else. You know, and having a husband who is so amazing at, hey, my stuff is mine and your stuff is yours, don't take responsibility for mine and I won't take responsibility for yours. And
Yeah.
that was super beneficial because I was no longer trying to do a codependent relationship like I did with my ex fiance years ago.
Yeah.
And so there's been so many layers in this last year that I've processed through where it's like, okay, I know that my worth is inherent, regardless of what other people think, regardless of what I
Absolutely.
do for other people. It
Yes.
is inherent within inside me. And I can find my own values and my own purpose in myself. And so that is how I have landed on my purpose, is to share my journey with other people and to
Hmm.
be there for them. And I have, like I said, I've become this unofficial peer support where I've got friends and strangers that will just come and talk to me and share their story. And I could be like, here is mine. Here's all these tools. I've been through 5 different types of therapy. Here's these different tools that have helped me. Maybe they can help you.
Hmm.
And so it's just been such a fun journey. And then finally coming to this realization that I wanted to do this podcasting stuff. You know, this is my second podcast here, you know, and we're with the other podcasts I've been doing, we're in the talks of possibly starting a radio show and I've got this book coming out to kind of share my poetry and share my love of God and faith and hope and peace with other people.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just such an amazing journey that I've been on, to be able to wipe away and throw away all the things that are not me, that I thought were me for so many years, to be able to find my purpose and my work.
Yes.
So that is kind of where I'm at today, is just I am constantly fighting every single day to
Mm-hmm.
challenge all of those stuck points that I had for so many years, and to find that love. And whenever I feel that darkness, I overcome it by turning to my higher power, by doing service work, by writing, by praying, whatever it is, trying to help the next person. I can challenge this darkness inside of me. The darkness will never truly go away. And that's the thing that I'm learning, is that I
Mm-hmm.
can find peace in the pain,
Yeah.
that I can find that light in the darkness,
Yeah.
and that darkness doesn't have to take over. And so it's this
Correct.
constant battle every day. But even though sometimes those passive suicidal ideations come up, it's more so like, hey, I'm ready for this world to be done. I'm ready for, I'm ready for the second coming. I believe in Christ, right? I'm ready for the second coming. I'm ready for this world to be over. And I still struggle with that. But there are those moments, like yesterday, I was driving, and for the first time in a long time, I just prayed and I was like, God, I really am glad that I am here. I
Mm.
really, truly am glad that I am here, because this world has so much beauty in it. And thank you for helping me find the beauty, because, yeah, there's hell everywhere. There is
Yeah.
darkness everywhere, but I can
Yeah.
find those moments of peace and find those moments of joy. And so I choose to do that every single day.
Yes. Yes. Oh, amazing. What a story. Um, I don't think I have anything to add to that. It's just you told it so beautifully and summed it up so nicely. I think the only thing I would ask is, what would you tell to somebody who is in their own darkness right now?
Can I actually read a poem? And
Yes,
yeah,
please.
I'll read a poem. And this is the one that I wrote when I was in the psych unit, right? And I
Okay.
think this will sum things up very well.
Okay.
And so the thing that I will say is that if you are in the darkness, there is always hope in the fight. You can continue moving forward. That there, even in the darkest moments, there is still hope. And so I'll read this poem for you.
Okay.
The fight is still so real. It pulls me to and fro. It makes me feel insane, like I have nowhere safe to go. It yells inside my mind, tells me I'm a fool, that in seeking out some help, I'm just another mule. I know that this is temporary. It will not last that long. And the purpose of this fight is to make me strong. I know that there are others fighting right beside, yet part of me still wishes the fight would just subside. Depression and anxiety fill me to the core. I can tell you this much: this life is not a bore. There's beauty still around, faith and love still there, even though I hide them, making me feel bare. I won't give in to evil, it cannot have my life, though it tries to overcome and cuts me like a knife. I know that God is watching, offering his aid. Sometimes it's through angels or offering a blockade. Sometimes it's through man who offer a kind deed, or nature, music, scriptures, even in books I read. I know he won't give up in helping me return. There are just so many lessons I have yet to learn. So when I feel despair and my path seems hard to follow, I look down at my feet and take one step towards tomorrow. It's the only way I know that today I can bear the struggles set before me. And one day I can share the hope that kept me going on this journey I went through, to the glory in the end when we are made anew. So, what I can say is if you are struggling, just know that there is hope and just take one more step. One more step. You don't know what's on the other side of that next step. There is
Yeah.
so much beauty that is still around.
Yes.
Just reach out. Like the 988 hotline is there
Hmm.
for everybody. I have called them, I can't tell you how many times, in the middle of the night, during the day, even when I'm not suicidal, when I am just struggling and just need someone to talk to, but I can't get the words out to talk to anybody that I care about, or it's
Right.
too late and I don't feel like I deserve to wake somebody up, right? I
Yeah.
call that hotline, and that hotline has saved my life so many times. Reach out for help. Reach out for help. Write down any all of those crazy thoughts that you have inside your mind. Write them down, and when you write them down, you can see how ridiculous they are, and you can say that is a lie. That is not the truth. And you can challenge that. Reach out to God, reach out to whatever your higher power is, reach out to the universe, whatever it is. If you are reaching out to that light, the darkness has to retreat in that moment.
Hmm.
So, what I can say is just keep reaching out. You've got strangers, you've got friends, you've got family, you've got the hotlines, you've got nonprofit organizations, you've got recovery groups. Just keep
Yeah.
reaching out as often as you can. There is always hope.
Yes, there is. And thank you so much for being here today and sharing your story of hope and inspiring everybody who's listening. I appreciate you.
Thank you. I'm really glad that I was able to be here. It reminds me that I still have hope even in my darkest times. It reminds
Yes,
me why I'm doing this, because I know that there's still hope.
there is. Yes, for everybody.
Yes.